This video will cover importing of composite products from the European Union into Great Britain. We will be providing you with an overview of the changes to importing, followed by the steps traders need to undertake to be ready for the new requirements. This introduction to the import journey will include an insight into what they are, the policy behind it, and some key steps you can start to undertake now ahead of 1st of October 2021. Beginning with reasons for change, let's recap on why we find ourselves here today. The UK has left the EU single market and customs union. Her Majesty's government is responsible for protecting the UK's biosecurity. This means we need to ensure products that enter the United Kingdom are safe, of quality, and don't pose any health risks to citizens. As you are probably aware, the new import controls are being introduced in a phased way. The next set of requirements will come into force from the 1st of October 2021 and then 1st of January 2022 thereafter. From October the 1st, 2021, products imported into Great Britain must meet both customs, sanitary and phytosanitary requirements. These SPS controls apply on certain products to protect the nation's biosecurity and to control disease. An updated border operating model was published in July this year, which provides detailed information on how the imports regime will work. We will now give you an overview of the changes for importing composite products. From 1st of October, there will be new changes for products of animal origin and animal byproducts. These animal products will need to be pre-notified on the import of products, animals, food and feed system, also known as IPAFFS, and they will need to be accompanied by a certified export health certificate to enable documentary checks to be carried out. Composite products follow the phasing of controls for POAO. The following slides will cover these changes in further detail. Now we are going to talk about the import of product, animals, food and feed system, referred to as IPAFFS. IPAFFS is the IT system that enables GB importers to notify the relevant authorities of the arrival of goods that are subject to SPS controls. From 1st of October, composite products subject to SPS controls arriving from the EU will need to be pre-notified via IPAFFS. As the importer, it is your responsibility to ensure you have pre-notified the arrival of goods in advance. You should ensure the EU exporter has provided you with an electronic copy of the certified export health certificate and that a copy of the certificate has been uploaded to the notification. This process allows for remote documentary checks to take place. You will need to register for an IPAFFS account via the Government Gateway ID. Please be aware that the first person to register will become the administrative owner, and any notification raised on IPAFFS must be made by the person responsible for the load. We have included links to training sessions, videos, and material at the end of this presentation. This section provides a breakdown of the information you need to include on your notification. What you're importing, the date of import into Great Britain, which country it will come from, the consignment's place of destination. We would like to note that between October 2021 and December 2021, importers will be required to submit a simplified notification in IPAFFS. This is also known as an IMP notification. From January 2022, this notification will change and additional details will be required. The Retained Official Control Regulation, or OCR, set the framework for border checks and pre-notification requirements. From October 2021, traders must pre-notify the arrival of consignments using IPAFFS. Goods must be pre-notified 24 hours prior to their arrival at the point of entry. Where logistical constraints prevent pre-notification of 24 hours in advance of arrival, a derogation can be applied, allowing traders to pre-notify less than 24 hours but no less than 4 hours prior to arrival. Individual port health authorities can apply the derogation and set up pre-notification times between 24 and 4 hours according to local circumstances. So to summarize, the pre-notification requirements are: the consignment must have been pre-notified in advance of goods entering Great Britain. Pre-notification can only be raised via IPAFFS. In order to do this, you must have registered for an IPAFFS account, and port health authorities should be contacted to determine pre-notification timescales. We will now move on to export health certificates. Composite products coming into Great Britain from the EU from 1st of October must be accompanied by a certified export health certificate, unless they are exempt, and we will cover exemptions shortly. The export health certificate is issued to the EU exporter by the competent authority in the exporting country, in line with Great Britain's import requirements. The exporter must provide the importer with an electronic copy of the certified EHC. The exporter must ensure the original export health certificate travels with the consignment, and it is the importer's responsibility to upload the copy of the export health certificate onto IPAFFS. You should speak with the EU exporter to make certain that they are prepared to obtain an export health certificate. Copies of model export health certificates are available on gov.uk, so you can familiarise yourself with these requirements. Documentary checks will be taking place from October, and these will be conducted remotely, and goods will be able to enter Great Britain through any point of entry. For the next part of the webinar, we will go through the specifics of what you need to know when importing composite products. This slide gives an overview of the 3 broad steps you must follow. The first step is to determine if your product is a composite, and a definition is included in the next slide, which we will get onto in a moment. Once that is determined, the second step is to establish if your product may be eligible to be exempt from SBS controls, meaning if your product is exempt, an export health certificate or pre-notification on IPAFFS will not be required, and from January 2022, your product will not need to enter through a designated border control post. The final step is to then check if there are other import requirements for your product, such as animal health, public health requirements, or other requirements. So to recap, first, work out if your product falls under the definition of a composite product. If it does, check if it may be exempt from having to comply with SPS requirements, and then check if you may need to comply with other import requirements for your product. Going back to the first step, a composite product is defined as a foodstuff intended for human consumption that contains both processed products of animal origin and products of plant origin. It is only a composite product when the processing of the primary product is an integral part of the production of the final product and is not just added for flavoring. For example, products such as lasagna, chicken burrito, pizza, or cream liqueurs are composite products. This slide includes some examples of what we mean by that. So a tinned meat product, such as Spam, which often contains oils or herbs, is not a composite product because the oils or herbs is not an integral part of the production of the final product. Whereas a lasagna, which often contains vegetables, is a composite product because the plant products are a necessary part of the production of the final product. Once you've established if your product is by definition a composite, you move on to the next step, which is to determine if your product is exempt from SPS controls. Composite products, just like POAO products, are subject to SPS controls unless they fall under the exemptions set out in legislation. For a product to be exempt, it must meet all the requirements in Article 6.1a of the retained EU decision for importing composites, or be listed in Annex II of the retained decision, and in both cases must also meet all the conditions set out in Article 6.2. The next few slides explain this in more detail. So for a product to be exempt under Article 6.1a, it must contain no meat product at all, the total processed animal product content, such as the processed egg, must be less than 50%, and the final product must be either ambient stable, or if it is chilled or frozen, the final composite product itself must have been cooked or heat treated sufficiently so that any raw material is denatured. On that last point, this means that where you have a frozen or chilled product, for the product to be exempt from SPS controls, it is the final composite product itself that must have been cooked and not just the individual components. Another way your product may be exempt is to check if your product is listed in Annex 2 of the retained EU legislation. A link is included in this presentation. In both cases, whether your product falls under the Article 6.1a exemptions or Annex 2 exemptions, you must also always meet the requirements in Article 6.2, such as the product must have come from an approved country and have undergone the required treatment for dairy products from that country. We will get into this in more detail later. If you are still unsure whether your composite product is exempt, please consult the Port Health Authority of the port of arrival for further assistance in advance. There are also further conditions that must apply if your product is exempt from SPS controls, and these are listed in the slide here. These are: the product must be clearly identified as intended for human consumption. It must be securely packaged or sealed in clean containers. It must be accompanied by a commercial document and labelled in English so that document and labelling together give information on the nature, quantity, and number of packages of the composite products, the country of origin, the manufacturer, as well as an ingredient list. Once you have gone through the step of establishing if your product is exempt from SPS controls, you must then check if there are other import requirements for your product. As a general principle, the processed animal product content and the finished composite product must meet both animal and public health requirements. So any POAO content, such as the dairy content, must meet normal GB animal and public health requirements that would apply to POAO. And the finished composite product must meet normal GB animal and public health requirements for food. So the animal health requirements are all processed animal product content must come from an approved country. Dairy product content must have undergone the relevant treatment for the country of origin of the dairy product, and meat product content must have undergone the required treatment for the country of origin for the meat type concerned. The public health requirements are that the processed animal product content must come from an approved establishment, a country with an approved residue control plan for the product concerned, where that is required, and the public health requirement for the finished composite product must comply with general food hygiene packaging provisions and come from a country where the composite product manufacturer does not need a residue control plan. Another import requirement you may need to comply with is the establishment requirements for where your product was produced. So if the composite product is made using raw animal product, which is processed during manufacture of the composite product, the establishment producing the composite product must be approved, and therefore an ID mark is required on your consignment. And if the composite product is made using previously processed animal product, the establishment where the composite product is made only has to be registered and not approved, and therefore an ID mark is not required. Finally, if your product contains any dairy, there are dairy requirements you must comply with. Any milk product included in any composite products must be derived from and treated as provided for in countries listed in Annex I of the retained EU decision included in this slide. This brings us to the end of all the other import requirements your composite product must comply with from the 1st of October. Finally, if your product is a fish composite, it may need to meet additional requirements in order to be imported to Great Britain. These are outlined here and have been in place since the beginning of this year. So since January 2021, imports of most fish from the EU have required validated, illegal, unreported, and unregulated documents. And these are a CAT certificate, processing statement, and proof of storage. It is the exporter's responsibility to complete these documents, get them validated by the relevant competent authority, and then send on to the importer. The importer then sends these on to the appropriate port health authority of the port of arrival in advance. A specific requirement for fish are that all third country fishing vessels are required to land into appropriately designated ports and submit the relevant port state control form. Third country fishing vessels landing fresh fish into the UK, except EU vessels landing into Northern Ireland, are also required to, in advance of landing, submit a prior notification form and a pre-landing declaration, and to also send and complete and validated CAT certificate, and must also meet customs formalities. Third country food approved vessels, such as factory, freezer and reefer vessels, landing frozen or processed fish will also need to, from the 1st of October, complete a captain certificate and pre-notify on IPAFFS, and from January 2022, land into points of entry with appropriately designated BCPs. We will now take you through the process the exporter must follow to send goods to Great Britain. The exporter will need to ensure goods meet GB import requirements as outlined in the Export Health Certificate. They must also make sure the competent authority has been contacted and steps have been taken to enable the inspection and certification of the goods. And finally, they must make sure that an electronic copy of the Certified Export Health Certificate has been sent to the importer. The original certificate and all other supporting documentation must travel with the consignment. There are also actions the importer must take prior to goods entering Great Britain. The importer should, number 1, obtain an EORI number. Number 2, check the business exporting the good has met their requirements. 3, ensure customs declarations are carried out. These can be made by the importer, or an agent can be hired to do this on their behalf. 4, source the relevant commodity codes. 5, ensure the value of the goods is known. 6, find out if you can reduce or delay duty payments. 7, check the labelling, marking and marketing standard rules. 8, obtain an electronic copy of the Export Health Certificate from the exporter. 9, raise a pre-notification on IPAFFS prior to arrival at the border. Again, this can be done by an agent acting on their behalf. 10, upload the electronic copy of the Export Health Certificate to the IPAFFS notification. 11, be prepared for remote documentary checks to be carried out. 13, get your goods through customs. 14, claim a VAT refund. 15, claim for any rejected goods. And finally, 16, keep a record of invoices. Finally, here we capture the up-and-coming changes from January the 1st, 2022. As you can see, identity and physical checks will be introduced for products of animal origin, including composite products, animal byproducts, and germinal products. We will provide more information on the January changes throughout autumn. Thank you very much for your time.